Okay, welcome! And this is the last session of the day. I had the first session and the last session, and what I know about you guys, you're really interested in the topic. So that's a good thing, really. And the topic being a practical approach to the Lync Call Quality Methodology, CQM. Who have done CQM here already? Within their deployment or for customers or anywhere? No one. That's great. Because I'm going to focus on how to get you guys started with this. Because CQM can be a really valuable methodology in terms of being proactive at maintaining a pristine Lync solution. So what is it? And why should I care? Anyone here have used Operation Manager for Lync? Implemented, used it? Yep, some of you. And who has looked at the monitoring reports within Lync? Hopefully more people. Great. Well, these kinds of technologies are reactive technologies in terms of monitoring your Lync deployment and making sure that you can catch that a service is down on or a server has issues. CQM is proactive. It's a long process in tuning your solution and finding the correct usage patterns and helping users succeed with quality within Lync. So let me tell you a story of end user experience. So you have the end user here in his office, and he has a computer, and there's a lot of elements that a user is touching in the media path of making a call. So he has his headsets as well, and he makes a call to a conference, for instance. And the call goes to the front-end server on the MCU on the front-end server. Or he could use a tablet, a mobile phone to do the same thing, then maybe over wireless. So already there's a lot of components within this call that can make the end user experience suck. So if you use the wrong headset, well, the experience wouldn't be that great. Or if the network between the client and the server is not optimal, well, you could get a poor user experience. And then we have other components as well. If you call someone from the conference to a mobile phone, you go through the mediation server and then out on the PSN network through a gateway or direct SIP trunk. So there's a lot of elements here that can make this call bad. And then you have external users as well, joining in the conference, maybe through VPN or through the edge server. So CQM is about looking at these components individually. It is 9 components within CQM that we are looking at. We are looking at counters for server health, and we are looking at the different networks between the client and the server and the mediation server and the mediation server and SIP trunk, and also looking at the different carriers like wireless, wired, VPN, and external, in order to help you find where the bottlenecks are. This is the goal of CQM. And my goal here today is to help you get started with CQM, a really practical approach, because Microsoft have been talking about this for about a year. And I've been to both the Tech Ed session and the sessions at Lync conference, and those sessions were delivered by the guys creating these tools and creating methodology, and they really fast just dived into the nitty-gritty stuff on troubleshooting and so on. So I actually had a hard time grasping what is this really and how can I utilize this? And that is what I want to tell you guys. So let's start with how to get started in the first place. Then we're looking at the results. And then we look at how we can operationalize this by creating a baseline and prioritizing elements we want to improve. And then we improve them. And then we operationalize it. So this is not a quick fix. This is a long project. It is something you do in between, but it's proactive. And then I also want to tell you that CQM becomes CQD in Skype for Business. So CQM is about call quality methodology, and in Skype for Business, you have the call quality dashboard. So it's actually built into Skype for Business. But I'm still going to talk to you about how we do it in 2013 and 2010. Because it's the same thoughts behind it. Sounds interesting? Yep. Great. Okay. My name is Ståle Hansen. I work at Knowledge Factory as a chief technical architect. And I have been interested in operationalizing quality within Lync for several years. I've been working with enterprise voice projects since 2008, and I'm seeing that quality within Lync is really important, but it's also really difficult to troubleshoot. So how do we get started? Well, first you download the white paper and the tools. You set up the key health indicators on each server. That's your first action. Because you can't troubleshoot quality unless you have full control that your servers are running okay. And then we make sure we have the prerequisites in order for collecting quality of experience data. Anyone here know what quality of experience data is? Yep. It's the data, the metrics from each call that is sent to a database through the monitoring role that measures packet loss, jitter, round-trip times, network metrics, and also end-user experience metrics in terms of how the codec performed and so on. So, last part of getting started is actually running the PowerShell script to getting that quality of experience data. So, let's start from the beginning. Download the white paper and tools, because this is part of the network planning, monitoring, and troubleshooting with Lync server white paper. Anyone read that white paper? One? It's great. It's like, 150 pages talking about metrics and so on. If you have trouble sleeping at night, you should start reading that white paper. It's awesome. You will fall asleep within minutes. But you should read it. I'm not kidding. But part of that white paper, you get the tools as well in order to do CQM. You set up the key health indicators, and the key health indicators are performance counters on the servers. And Microsoft says that there are 7,000 Lync-related counters on a Lync server. So we are looking at 80 of those. The 80 most important counters, and we're going to analyze them as well. But the most important part here, you need to create a baseline when it's working. Because you can't troubleshoot using key health indicators and performance counters if you have nothing to compare it with. You can, of course, look at the parameters where the counters are healthy or not, but you don't know if it were like that before it started failing. So baseline is best practice, and you do that for 14 days in order to capture all the different user patterns. And this has been a best practice from Microsoft for lots of years, and for Exchange and everything. You should create a baseline. And you also should create a new baseline each time you change something. You have lots of new users, or you introduce new components into the solution. Instead of logging on each server and starting those key health indicators, because you're going to run this create KHI collection PS1's PowerShell script, Tom Inge Larsen, which is a Lync architect, has created a script that will start this on all your servers within your Lync deployment. So that's actually quite useful. And then make sure your prerequisites are in order for QE collection. And first off, you need to make sure that quality of experience is enabled, that you are collecting that data by using PowerShell, of course. You can do this through the graphical user interface as well, but it's so much cooler doing it in PowerShell, right? Yep. And two things here. We are looking for that you have enabled quality of experience, that you have deployed the monitoring reports and the monitoring databases. And also, the recommendation is to disable purging. By default, the data is purged every 90 days. And that's just 3 months. So I would like to have more data, more historical data in terms of doing this. So, and the database don't grow much either. It's like 31K per user per day. That's nothing in terms of SQL storage terms. And then we need to monitor the monitoring database instance, because no one remembers that. So you can run the PowerShell command, get CS service, monitoring database, and then look for the pool, FQDN, and instance name. You create a folder called C:CQM and copy over the tools to that folder. And also check the database for the date format, because we want to collect data from this SQL database within a month or something. And then we need to know the format we need to ask for that data in. So part of the toolset is this script called getSQLDateFormat, PS1. And it will return use the date format, month, day, year, or something else. The following must be true in order to succeed with this. You need to have SQL Server 2008. You should run this from a Lync front-end server or a Lync server to ensure that you have the correct SQL tools and the correct PowerShell version. You need to be at least DB data reader on the database itself, called QE metrics. And then you run the script, cqm.ps1, with the start time and end time, typically within a month or maybe longer or different periods. You specify the instance, you specify where you want to store the data, what kind of Lync version you have, and then also what the poor stream condition is. And I will get back to what that is. So, let's download the white paper. So I'm going to show you this now. So when you're finished here, you really know how to do it. You store the white paper and the zip file and extract the content. From there, you will see what kind of content you get. You get the white paper, and you also get the tools. First off, we want to start the key health indicators. And that's a PowerShell script. And you should run it on each front-end server, or use that script that does that for each server in your database. So here you have set up the key health indicators, which is the performance counters. You go into performance monitor, and start the collection set. And this should run for 14 days, as I said. Then we want to check the quality experience configuration on the Lync deployment. We see that the purging is false and enable for quality experience is true. And then we create a directory, the CQM, and we move the data to that directory in order to prepare for running the CQM script. So we want the queries, the SQL queries, and the PowerShell scripts. Then we find the instance, because we want to find the date format on the QA metrics database. And by running the get SQL date format.ps1, we get that data. And it gives us the correct format. And then we're ready to run the script. We have the entire information we need. We have the QA instance. We have the date format we want to publish this with. And we're done. That's it. We're ready. And you also can see that data is stored in the same folder. And this is the data we want to import in the report sheet. It's not that really that difficult. And now you have lots of data you can look at in terms of finding bottlenecks within your deployment. So let's look at understanding the results. You have two Excel spreadsheets. You have one called Lync Server 2013 Key Health Indicators, and you also have one for 2010. And you also have the Microsoft Call Quality Methodology scorecard for Lync Server XLSM, which are the two worksheets we are working with. So 14 days later, we stop the key health indicators, and we get the data from your performance counters. Save it as a CSV. And we need to manipulate that data a bit before we can import it to Excel in order to get average and max value, which we are interested in. So let's look at how we do that, because now you have seen how we can do it and you remember better. So we stop the key health indicators, the counters. We find out where it's stored. And we navigate to that location, and we find the counters we want to look at. Rename it to txt and open in Notepad. Here we need to do some manipulation. I'm replacing dot with comma within the CSV file, because in order for Excel to format this in the correct format, we need to make sure it works for our Scandinavian Excel spreadsheets. When we import it, we specify the delimiter in order to find the correct tables to import this. And we have the data we want. Here's a lot of data, a lot of numbers. And we format the spreadsheet just a bit in order to make it easier to read the data. And also, I recommend filtering this, because we want to look at spikes as well. So we want to filter it in order to find the smallest value and the largest value. Because sometimes you can see that there are some crazy spikes, like 24 instead of 9, which may screw up the average value. And you should evaluate if you should exclude them or not. And then we need to put data into the spreadsheet, and we want the average values and the max values. And it will go red if the values are out of bounds. So we have for system counters, we have front-end counters, we have SQL and back-end database counters, and so on. And for finding the correct counter, we just search for it, sort it, and find the values you want. And of course, there's a lot of better ways to do this as well. And so this is just an example, but the goal here is to find the correct values. And you need to do this for every pane within the spreadsheet. Could take some time, actually. And you can spend half a day maybe plotting in this spreadsheet. And you need to take some breaks in between and so on. If you want a parser for the CSV file, Richard Brinterson is working on that right now in his cloud-based troubleshooting platform. So he's in a beta right now, works only with a front-end server, but hopefully he can help us parse this so we get a nice output of the max value and the average value. Because I thought about making a PowerShell script for this, but it is quite complicated. And it's not just made in a couple of hours. You need to think it through. So, and he does that, and then I let him think it through, and then I can just consume his knowledge. It's awesome. Here I have a spreadsheet I have filled out, and you see there is a lot of red on the max side. And hopefully when you run this over 14 days, the average value won't be that dependent on the max values. For instance, if you have a global deployment and you have users connected to your platform 24/7, it's not good enough that you have max values within out of bounds at night, because there's always some kind of users connecting to your platform. But we see that there are typically the max values are out of bounds. So you need to look at it and also look at the reason for it. And there's also a good description of what that means. So in this case, if this value is high, you may have a SQL bottleneck, which may affect presence information and chat and all those zip-based real-time communications. And also one thing you need to think about is that sometimes the PowerShell script can't find counters for your instance on the SQL backend. So you may have to do that manually in order to find the correct counter for your backend. And this is quite interesting information, especially since we often don't have full control over our SQL backend. But it really affects the solution. And I did this for a customer, and they had really issues with presence. They had issues where presence were unknown for quite some time on internal users. And they also had identified that had issues with their SQL server. But still, we found that the counters were way too high. At the most, it took 45 minutes to get the response back from the SQL server, which is too long. And they were a global company, so it wasn't good enough. Second part of this, so you should work on your key health indicators first. You should work from inside out. So you shouldn't start with improving wireless as the first thing, because if your core performance is not good, then it will never be good. So, but after you have looked at the key health indicators, you should look at the CQM data, the quality of experience data. So you import it into the scorecard, you understand the results, and find the obvious areas to fix. And then you prioritize, you fix them, you measure, you import the results, you understand the results, you find bottlenecks to fix, and then you fix them, and then you do a new evaluation, and so on and so on. So this is an ongoing process. So the Excel spreadsheet is really good. And it was surprisingly easy to get the results. You saw how easy it was to collect the data, as long as we had the correct prerequisites and so on. And you should go through the spreadsheet in terms of tuning it correct. So we use the correct delimiter, the correct date format. You specify off work days. If you're working 24/7 each time, you should maybe not exclude work days. You navigate and find the data. In this case, I removed the work days because we are a Scandinavian company. And I look at the data. And you get some nice both histograms and cake diagrams. That's enough, right? Because then you can send it to your CTO and he understands what he's looking at. So you have actually this cake diagram is of all the poor calls, where are they placed? So the first one looked at all the calls and looked at the percentage of poor calls. This is only the poor calls, and we see that external users are really dominating this. But we see also lots of users are using VPN, and we also have some bad calls between mediation server and gateway. So you really should ignore external. That's the last part you should look at. But you should look at VPN, for instance. It's not optimal to send voice quality or voice calls through VPN, because VPN will send it another direction. It's not an optimal media path, because the user will be handled as an internal user, and he will talk to the front-end server instead of the edge server. So best practice here is to use split tunneling in order to make sure that the link media goes outside of the VPN tunnel. So you shouldn't have much VPN calls here, really. So that's actually a low-hanging fruit in terms of looking at tuning VPN for Lync. And then I would have looked at mediation to gateway, because these are my phone calls within a deployment, and I should make sure that these are 100% okay. Because we should have control over the call flow between the mediation server and the gateway or the direct SIP trunk. In this deployment, I know that the SIP trunk is consumed over the internet. So this shows that that's not an optimal way of doing it. You should have it delivered through a dedicated MPLS line from the operator. Then you can have end-to-end quality of experience or quality of service as well. Any questions? No questions? Okay. Let's look at the other stuff. See? Just... Yep. So look at trending graphs. So this is really good information. And here you see that poor calls to the gateway it's too much. Shouldn't be like that. And then we look at wired as well. That's something you have control over. And if you look at wired peer-to-peer, this is like what wired should look like. And apparently not many people do peer-to-peer on wireless. But then you have VPN and you have external. So VPN is a bottleneck here. We should look at the performance on the VPN and look at what kind of users are connecting to VPN and can we do something about it. And then you have external, of course, which is difficult to have control over. And then we look at the top issues here. What kind of subnets have the most issues? And here we see poor streams. Not that much really. So nothing is pointing out here, nothing special to follow. And also on the wireless streams, not much to, there's not a specific subnet doing this. So didn't help much, really. I won't spend too much time in troubleshooting different subnets. And then you see mediation to gateway. What kind of gateways can we have issues with? And there's especially one in Stockholm. The one on top, which it's not crazy much, but something we should make sure is pristine always. Nothing is worse than having a bad phone call. And you also see that the same gateway is showing up more than once. And then we look at devices with the most issues. And I'm not sure what all these devices are, but some of them I know usually work quite well. So it could be other reasons for this headset's not working correct. It could actually be a firmware update or something like that. So we see that Plantronics is not doing well, and then we see Turtle Beach, which is not Lync optimized. Maybe replace that with another headset. And then we see users that have issues with the endpoints. And it's called caller audio mic glitch rate. And that is typically based on the computer having issues more than the headset having issues. And we see, I don't know if you saw that, but it was one person who showed up all the time, and that's the guy on the Mac. So it's nothing wrong with the headset, but you should look into his computer, if you can call it that. And you can see all the data behind those charts in the different panes in the spreadsheet. So you can dive into the material. Cool? I think that this is really valuable data that you can work from. And you know that just looking at the monitoring reports, everything looks good, but it could be some bottlenecks here, and this will bubble that up for you. So what is poor stream condition? Well, Microsoft said that they are having trouble communicating with the network guys, right? When we as Lync guys try to talk with the network guys, and we talk about ratio concealed samples average, we talk about degradation average, they don't care about that. So they made the default way of collecting the data by just looking at packet loss rate and packet loss rate max, which typically points out poor performing networks. Then, of course, you could do classified poor call, but the most value to the network department is where you look at packet loss. And it is used within the plant, last mile, and trending queries. And plant is the server side, last mile is the right before the endpoint. Typically wired, wireless, and so on. And the reports, the AVMCU to mediation is part of the plant. And we look at mediation to gateway on different sites. We look at wired and wireless within the network. But if you want to measure your edge server, you need to do that manually, because the edge server doesn't send quality of experience reports, because it's just a relay server. So if you're having issues with underperforming edge servers, you need to check with the pre-call diagnostic tool, which you can download for Windows, or that is also a Windows Store app. And you can do that from home or from within the DMZ to see if you're having underperforming network components or servers and so on. So now we have the results. Now we can analyze the results, and then we operationalize. So I created a baseline. We prioritize what to fix: VPN, wired networks, make sure that the components most used are prioritized here. And then we fix it, and then we rinse and repeat. So you should fix it in this prioritized order. So you have servers, endpoints, and network. So you do your servers first, which is the key health indicators. Always start with the key health indicators and the performance counters. And then you look at AVMCU to mediation, because you have full control over the network between the front-end server and the mediation server. They could even be in the same rack or even be co-located. And then you look on next hop from the mediation server, which could be a gateway or a direct SIP trunk solution. And you should also try to get some data from the gateway, if possible. And here are some good tips on what you should look after and how you can fix it. So key HIs on server part should be in a healthy range. If not, fix it. AVMCU, poor streams, packet loss rate, and use detailed queries to find different front-end servers within a pool that is underperforming. And here you need to investigate. Here your troubleshooting skills will come into play. Now you can do network monitoring. Now you can really dive into this. But it is sometimes easier to just look at the server health and find some low-hanging fruits. Endpoints. Look at the device. And that's the headset or your speaker device or whatever. And make sure that it's not a firmware upgrade that's causing this or anything else. Then you look at the system running this, and then the media path from the device, like VPN versus connecting to the edge server and so on. And then, of course, the media transport, which is the wired or wireless in itself. So look at how you can optimize this. And in terms of devices, you should really pay attention if a lot of users are using built-in speakers, because that really is not optimal. You need to look at who is using this speaker device and why. So now you need to go out and talk to the end users as well. And then we have system, And here you need to have the correct BIOS version. You need to find that golden computer configuration that always works. So here you have standardizing on the correct devices and making sure they have the correct drivers and so on. Could even be network drivers that is underperforming on different devices. And then media path, of course. Where is it going? And then the transport. Look, if there are a lot of TCP streams, which should be 0. And identify problems with subnet. And as we saw in the Excel spreadsheet, it wasn't subnet that was the bottleneck here. And then you should look at network. You should fix wired, and then wireless in the end. And here you can spend a lot of times. But best practice is end-to-end quality of service. So you can prioritize link traffic over Olympics, video streams on YouTube, or whatever. And especially if you have deployed Lync as your telephony solution, you should make sure that you have reserved bandwidth for your voice traffic. And the wireless, which is, I'm guessing that 90% of the wireless networks around in Scandinavia is not built for voice over IP. It's built for access, so you can access your internet. And you also need to look at media path. If you have unmanaged devices, and their media path is they are on the internet, they will go through the edge server. And that's not optimal media path for internal devices wanting to use Lync Mobile and so on. So this is something, a whole other area. But you should prioritize wired over wireless. And you should also look at what is your primary carrier for voice traffic. I see a lot of businesses moving to the wireless office, but then you need to take wireless seriously. So the systematical approach: baseline, prioritize, remediate, and operationalize. Microsoft said that they have done this internally, and they spent half a year before stuff started to improve. And at some point, they thought they had succeeded in remediating all the issues. But they kept monitoring, and over time it became worse. Because the infrastructure shifts. You have updates that can change this. You have firmware upgrades. You have new components introduced into the system. So this is an ongoing process, and it's proactive. And the success of a Lync deployment is users not noticing issues. And if you're on top of those issues, users will be happy. And happy users are actually more productive. They're 10 to 12% more productive. They found out that last year, actually, in the University of Warwick, that actually did a survey on this, so it's true. Any questions about CQM? Who is going to run home and do this? Everyone! Yay! The performance counters? Yes. Yep. I did fix all that, and I just ran the PowerShell script. Yep. And then import it to Excel. And then have to search for each value, which one is important or not. And it's not like on one page. You have to go through different pages. Yes. So yeah, it is. It is a lot of take in, and that's why you should read the white paper, because everything is in there, like in those 130 pages. But this is when you have the results, you need to work on understanding that, and that is a long process as well, because you need to use quite advanced troubleshooting techniques, and experience and knowing the media path and so on. And but the most important thing here is to find that there is no obvious issues, like everyone is running VPN, 100% of our users, because or find that the media path is skewed up. So just look at, so it looks okay, and then it's difficult to find the last few users that are having the biggest issues. But then you need to look at it as a whole, and also look at BIOS drivers and everything. So it is a really complicated and complex process, and it takes time. In Skype for Business, CQM becomes the call quality dashboard, which means that we don't have to run the script in order to collect the data and put it in an Excel spreadsheet. It is a quality of experience archive through SQL Analysis Cube. It's a web API, and you have a report portal. And it's shipped externally to the Skype for Business, so it's a different download. And it uses SQL Server Analysis Services. It's a web API, and you can edit and design the reports yourself. And I'm guessing it works for Skype for Business Server, but it may also work with Lync Server 2013 and 2010. I'm not sure. So it will look like this. So you have the data at all time, and the goal is to get the updated data within seconds. So it's easier to bubble up the issues here and make sure it is within the correct parameters. And Microsoft have written quite a lot on understanding both the quality of experience data and the counters and everything. So that's where I recommend reading the white paper, or just looking at it, what kind of data is there, and dive into the different counters you are having issues with. So, I've talked about how to get started, how to understand the results. You should operationalize this and spend a year trying to improve this over time. You don't have to spend much time on it, but you need to find prioritized places to remediate the issues. And then in Skype for Business, this will become a dashboard. So hopefully, you can get started with CQM and do more with it. So don't stop doing it, keep going. This is the best way to make a healthy Lync deployment. Okay, thank you so much for attending here. And remember to evaluate the sessions as well as today and tomorrow. And enjoy the rest of the evening.